Good morning, everybody. You all live on air down there? Good? Well done. This is a very good day, and it's great for me as both the Prime Minister and as a local federal member of Parliament to see what's happening at the Translational Research Institute here in Brisbane. It's exciting. It's important. It affects real people's lives. We're on about building Australia's future. We're on about building the future of our new industries and our new jobs, like the ones you see at work here. We're on about building the education system of the future. We're on about building the health and hospital system of the future, a clean energy future, and of course a future where everyone has universal access to affordable and high-speed broadband. Tanya Plibersek, the Health Minister, is with me, and she has put in a phenomenal amount of work into how we further support the medical research industry in Australia. And we have two important initiatives to announce today. I'm going to turn to Tanya to do that, and then I'll make some further remarks and throw it open to you, good folk, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Tanya.
Thank you so much, Prime Minister, and thank you for your support for what I think is a very important initiative, something that will serve us well for the future of Australia. We know that investment in health and medical research has two very important payoffs. It has a payoff for the health of Australians, and we've had amazing discoveries in Australia, like the commercialisation of penicillin that saved so many lives during the Second World War, like the cochlear implant. And we're here today with Ian Fraser, whose invention of Gardasil is already paying off, is already showing reduced numbers of cervical lesions in young women, making a difference to cancer outcomes for all Australians. We know that there's this health payoff for our community, but there's another payoff as well. Our investment in health and medical research means top quality jobs for Australians in the future. We toured these labs this morning. We met so many brilliant people lured from overseas, and many of them Australians lured back from overseas because we've invested in research. Some of the best minds from around the world at work right here in Brisbane, right here in Australia, solving the problems that ail us as a community. So we've got the health payoff, we've got the brains brought back here. There's a further benefit as well, and that's the economic benefit we reap from investing in medical research. The estimate is for every dollar we put in, we get about $2.17 back in benefits, economic benefits as well. Those smart, high-tech jobs of the future. Ian told me that downstairs they've got a small manufacturing facility that can quickly manufacture new drugs that can be tested right here and that can ramp up to produce drugs that can be used in our hospitals here and around Australia. So exciting to have those export earnings for Australia as well. In fact, our health and biomedical area, our export of pharmaceuticals, for example, is one of our most important exports, and it's one of the ones that we hear little about. Our investment as a Labor government in health and medical research is at historic highs. In 2013-14, we'll put $771 million into health and medical research, supporting about 8,500 researchers at institutes like this and in universities around Australia. Around 80 research institutes and universities. We've invested extra in speeding up clinical trials because we know that having access to the newest medicines is terrific for Australian patients, but it's also great for our industry here. We attract resourcing from overseas, from pharmaceutical companies from around the world, because they know that they can get cheaper research overseas. They can't get better research anyway. Our clinical trials here in Australia stand up anywhere in the world. If a company brings its clinical trials here and does its science here, they don't have to repeat that in the next country and the next country, get incredible results. Australian results are accepted around the world because of the quality of our researchers and the quality of our science. We've put around $700 million as a government into health and medical research infrastructure. You see about $140 million worth of Commonwealth investment in this building, but around Australia, those of you who are at Westmead just on the weekend would see another $22 million going into the Westmead Millennium Institute and the children's medical research there. that we announced on the weekend. But around Australia, we've invested in this sort of bricks and mortar that brings scientists together, that has clinicians coming from neighbouring hospitals, that has people who are teaching in our universities, all working together to solve the critical problems of the day. And today we're announcing another very important next step. When Mark Butler was the Minister for Medical Research, he commissioned the McKeon Review into health and medical research. This is one of the most important reviews Australia has ever seen. But a very talented committee, and we're meeting with a number of them just after this. And as a first stage of our response to this McKeon Review, I'm very proud to announce today two very important initiatives. The first is an innovation fund that will have $125 million from the Commonwealth Government, matched with $125 million from investors and industry, to take our research to the next stage. We do incredibly well as Australians in doing basic research, inventing and discovering new things. Where we've fallen down in the past is having the finances, the investment, to take that discovery from the laboratory into production and into our hospitals and pharmacies and other places. By investing this money in commercialisation, we can get the brain power that we've got here, the discoveries and the inventions, and actually capitalise on the next stage of taking those things into the marketplace. So it's a very exciting investment for Australia. We'll see, because of this Medical Research Innovation Fund, more of the things that we discover and invent in Australia staying in Australia for their production, for their scaling up, and retaining those financial benefits in Australia instead of seeing them licensed offshore and produced offshore. So that $250 million investment means not only export incomes for Australia, it means not only high-tech, good quality jobs for Australians, it means that Australian patients benefit faster from our research and our discoveries. There's also a number of other things that we're announcing today as a further rollout of the first stage of implementation of the McKeon Review. $70 million worth of investments, $47.5 million for 19 centres of research excellence. Some of these have been established already in areas like infectious diseases, telehealth, child health, chronic disease, ageing, Indigenous health and end-of-life care. These centres of research excellence respond to the problems that we say as a nation. These are the most important things facing us today. How can we get the best brains working on them? Today we're announcing 4 new centres focusing on Indigenous health, national clinical trials, international health and genomics. We're also announcing a number of changes to the National Health and Medical Research Council. We want the National Health and Medical Research Council not just to be an administrator of grants, although I believe they do an excellent job as administrator of grants. We want to streamline and simplify the grant process, but we also want to raise the profile of the leadership of the National Health and Medical Research Council to be not just science administrators, but advocates for scientists, advocates for health and medical research in Australia. We're also providing extra funding for a number of different arrangements in the field of health and medical research, integrated health research networks, which will take our research into clinical settings much more quickly, and also partnership projects, which are a partnership between our researchers and our health institutions, but also industry partners who are looking to capitalise quickly on our research and discovery. Finally, I'd like to announce that we're awarding 2 prestigious NH and MRC John Cade Fellowships in mental health research to support Australian mental health research. John McGrath, one of the recipients of those fellowships, is here with us today, and he's doing incredible work on the link between vitamin D and mental health or mental illness. It's exactly the sort of work that we should be doing here in Australia, and by winning this fellowship, he's able to concentrate full time on what this means for Australian women when they're pregnant and for people who develop mental illness later in life. Thank you, Prime Minister, for your support for these initiatives. The moment I spoke to the Prime Minister about this as a possibility, I think on my first day with the Prime Minister in his role, and I said to him, you know, this is something I'm profoundly excited about. He said, well, let's put health and medical research into your title so people know as a government how important we see it. And I pitched these ideas up, and I can't imagine a more enthusiastic response, because you've got a Prime Minister who gets what this means for the health of our nation and for our economic prosperity in the future.
Thanks very much, Tanya. Let me just add a few words before taking your questions. First of all, to all of our friends here at the TRI here in Brisbane, and Ian Fraser and the team, just congratulations and thank you for the excellent work that you all do. You're a seriously brainy bunch of people. And Tanya and I are rarely intimidated by folks. We're intimidated by each and every one of you, because you know exactly what you're doing when it comes to a critical area which affects the lives of ordinary Australians. And today I learned so many new things. This, folks, is a 3D printed double helix. Now, the purpose of this is not to show you a double helix. The purpose of this is to show you what 3D printing can do and what is being done with it here in the critical area of medical research, which then helps people in a very practical way. By constructing these sorts of scaffolds, our researchers here are able to use this to populate it with cells and enable bone and tissue reconstruction to occur. That's what they're working on now. More imaginatively, there are others who are working on how you use 3D printed scaffolds like this to eventually construct organs, including kidneys. And there is some phenomenal work being done here on that subject. It's complex and it's hard work. I'm not raising the expectations for you over there. Don't frown too much. But the Australian government wants to fund and invest in this sort of work because it means life-changing innovations for ordinary Australians who otherwise face really hard challenges. So to those of you working on these sort of projects, thank you very much. For the others that I've met this morning who are working on other great stuff, for example, some of the biological or genetic predispositions for alcoholism which can be dealt with in terms of particular interventions. Also the great work being done in prostate research, a challenge for so many men across Australia. And here we are funding one of 3 centres of excellence for prostate research, and the work being done on particular applications of particular drugs to the behaviour of individual prostate cancer cells, which I've seen on the screen just before. What's it all mean? It means that through first-class medical research and being translated into clinical applications, lives of Australians are changed. People might ask out there, and our good folk from the media might ask, what's translational research and what's a flash term like that being used for? It's a bit like this. Translating what is done by the folks in the white coats in these labs straight through to the hospital bed where people are suffering. Which is why translational research institutes like this are co-located with first-class tertiary hospitals like the PA here in Queensland. And why, for example, we're building this fantastic precinct involving the smart folks over at UQ, the smart folks over at QUT, all the brains concentrated, 650 of them in this building, the TRI here at PA, and a fantastic tertiary hospital as well. And so it is bringing the clinical side, patients in the bed and what they need, together with the research side. And that is what our government is passionately committed to. That's why we are delighted by the fact that we are the major investor in this project. And I'd like to thank also Chuck Feeney for his extraordinary contribution as well, a great internationalist who believes in the importance of funding projects like this. And what Tanya has said today about adding a very large medical research innovation fund, dollar for dollar, 125 million from the Commonwealth, 125 million from the private sector, to commercialise the great new breakthroughs being realised through research institutes like this, together with the other important investments she announced for the National Health and Medical Research Council. So, our overall proposition when it comes to the future of health and hospitals is pretty basic. None of this happens by magic. None of it just goes bonk, it's there, okay? It happens because you folks are really bright at what you do. Our job is to make it easier for you to do what you do. And when I've spoken to Ian over the years, it's about how do you create a working environment where the best brains in the country across the entire spectrum of medical research can come up with their series of eureka moments to say, hey, you know, we could get that breakthrough on Gardasil. We could get this breakthrough on a new cancer treatment drug. We could get this breakthrough in the dealing with prostate cancer. And that's what we're about. That's why we believe that government has a role, a central role, in building the health and hospital system of the future and building the country's future. In the context of the election campaign, there is a very simple challenge in terms of Mr Abbott, who wants to be Prime Minister. And that is, we're out there with a very bold plan through the Health and Hospitals Plan for Australia to invest $20 billion extra out to 2020 for the health and hospital system of the country, for the public hospital system. And in addition, a bold plan for investment in medical research institutes such as this. We're building up, but I don't hear any commitment from Mr Abbott about him being prepared to match any of what I have just described. In fact, all those investments are at risk. Mr Abbott says he must make $70 billion worth of cuts. That's the truth of it. Well, let me tell you again what $70 billion equals. It is the amount of money the Australian government spends over 4 years for every public hospital in the nation. This is not a piece of loose change. It's a vast amount of money. And so, my question to Mr Abbott is, what have you got to hide when it comes to coming clean and where your $70 billion worth of cuts will fall? What jobs will be cut, including research jobs? What frontline health workers will go, including the 3,000 at Medicare Local? What hospital funds will be cut? These are very basic questions. And to conclude on this, politics, as I've said to you before, is about priorities. Our priorities are clear about where we're building and why we're building for the future. One of Mr Abbott's priorities is his unfair, unfunded paid parental leave scheme. Under that scheme, some folks will get $75,000 a year under the paid parental leave scheme. It'll be paid for by your taxes. It'll be either paid for by an increased goods and services tax, or it'll be paid for by $70 billion worth of cuts, or part thereof, to health, education and to jobs. It's a pretty basic question. It's about priorities. And so with Mr Abbott, we seem to have a situation where he's already said, by the way, he's got the election in the bag. I think you would have seen those comments on the news last night. And so Mr Abbott, I fear, has arrogantly concluded he's already won the election and therefore will not come clean with the Australian people about where the cuts will come in jobs, health and education and in the GST in order to pay for his unfunded and unfair paid parental leave scheme. Over to you, folks.